Welcome back. This is Ask the Handicapper on At the Races. There was a race last night at Chelmsford, and one of our emailers said, what do you do with a horse like Mitrade? The emailer, tweeter in fact, was a bit blunt and said who's given a bad ride. But whether he's given a bad ride or a good ride is not really the point. The point is, what do you do with unlucky horses? Here we go. Here it is. Alan, he says, bad ride for jockey, look, the best horse in the race. So we're going to show the race once again. If you missed it last night, we'll just pinpoint the key animals for you here. In the blue and white cap is Mitrade, and the winner in the pink cap here is Hacker. And those two get different types of runs round the home bend, as we are about to see, Phil. Hacker's on the outside, pink cap gets an absolute solo. I mean, if we did stop it there, for instance, they're level, effectively, out of this bend. When they get to the end of the bend, Hacker's got the perfect position, and in the end, Mitrade will be shuffled back to second last. It's unbelievable to think they were upside half a furlong ago, and now look at them, and I don't think Hacker's done anything more. It's just Mitrade is getting shuffled back on the inside. In the end, there's half a length between them. What do you say about this kind of race, Phil? Do you say, well, Mitrade should have won that race, we're going to shove him up £5, or do you say Hacker won a shade cosily, so we'll leave it as it is? What do you do?
OK, well, first of all, I don't believe that Mitrade would have won the race, because I think the winner's still got something in hand, even though he gets to within half a length of him. I don't think he's gaining ground hand over fist on the leader at this point, and I think the winner in the end only has to be pushed out hands and heels. So I think we wouldn't consider using Mitrade as the winner in a case like that. But clearly he's better than he was capable of showing, because he was somewhat unlucky in running. So I think there was probably about 2.5 lengths, or 2 lengths between the second and the third. I think you might extend that distance and call it 2.5 lengths, and 2.5 lengths over a mile would be £5. So using Holiday Magic, who finished third in the race, as your base, then you'd probably leave Holiday Magic on his figure of 95, and you'd probably be putting Mitrade from 95 up to 100. But I'd still consider Harker as the winner of the race. Yeah.
But the simple fact is, both of these horses will go up for that, won't they? Mitrade will go up for his defeat, and that's the other thing that really gets people's goat, is they think, why? It's so why do you put horses up that get beaten and effectively stop them from winning, Phil?
Well, if that were the case, if we did stop them from winning, then we wouldn't do it. But the reality is that horses finishing second and third, and sometimes even fourth, that go up, have got a very, very high success rate next time, much higher than the national average. So if we didn't put them up, we'd have a ludicrous situation, and we wouldn't be producing competitive handicaps, which is what we do now.
Mr. Levy says, horses that don't win shouldn't be raised, in my opinion. Why do they do it? It seems so unfair.
OK, so what he's saying there, what he's suggesting is an interesting one. So let's say we only put winners up, right? And let's say seconds and thirds are always left, and 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 are all dropped. OK, over a period of time, we would have what we had many, many years ago, which is called slippage, and the overall level of the ratings would start to drop. And we used to have that jumping 15, 20 years ago, and what would happen at the end of the year is all of the horses would be pushed back up £5 or £10. Well, I don't think anyone wants to go back to that situation. So if we didn't put seconds and thirds up, there are 2 reasons. 1, we would have slippage. 2, they would win way more than their accepted percentage chance of winning. And at the moment, they've still got a higher than national average chance when we do put them up second and third.
And Steve's got a good question here, slightly changing tack again, but coming back to your favourite topic. He says, Phil factors in the so-called Aintree factor when calculating the Grand National handicap. Do any other racecourses have this factor when you're assessing?
No.
Not Chester?
No.
No other racecourse?
I think Chester's an interesting one. The only thing I would say with Chester is that if a horse is drawn double figures in a race in Chester, and it's got very, very, very good form, and it's clearly not able to produce its best running because of being on the outside and going on the outside all the way around, then we'd be probably fairly reluctant to drop it.
What about a horse? I'm trying to think what I'm trying to say here, as I said. What about a horse who has run 30 races? It's won 3 of them at Brighton. But whenever it races anywhere other than Brighton, it's rubbish. The only time it ever wins is at Brighton. wouldn't you factor that into a mark when it's not running at Brighton?
No, you've got to. I mean, what if the connections decide to run it at Catterick, and Catterick on? We can't just leave it on its last winning mark from Brighton. We've got to drop it over a period of time. You know, it runs 8 times at Catterick, and we leave it on the same mark, waiting for it to go back to Brighton. Who's to say that the horse isn't just deteriorating? We don't know that. It may just be deteriorating.
Let's have a quick word about 2-year-olds, because we seem to be in the midst of a sensational 2-year-old called Shalar. Now, of course, we've all seen great 2-year-olds in our time. Zaphonic will be one that people mention, El Gran Senor, those kind of horses. And I can't remember the same sort of buzz around them as Shalar. It may just be that in the modern era, we talk about them more than perhaps we used to in the past. But Shalar seems to have got you handicapped people going crazy.
Well, he's got my colleague Matthew Tester, who does the 2-year-olds, going crazy. He absolutely loves the horse, and he's got him rated 120, which is the highest rated Richmond winner for the last 25 years. We've got figures going back 25 years for all of these races. So he's got him the highest Richmond, and he's got him higher than last year's leading 2-year-old Bellardo, who was on 119. So he clearly thinks a lot of the horse. And I haven't looked at the rating of the horse particularly. I'll leave that to Matthew. But I watched the race, and visually he was really, really impressive, wasn't he? He's got such a high cruising speed.
Yeah. I mean, and we're thinking he's going to be a sprinter, do we? We don't think he's a Guineas horse.
Well, the trainer afterwards was saying that his main target next year is the Commonwealth Cup, which is the excellent new race that we've brought in this year. It seems to have worked really well. So it would appear that the trainer perceives he's going to be a sprinter next year.
Shalar's 120. As far as I can remember, Frankel 126 when he came back as a 3-year-old, so that was effectively his 2-year-old rating.
Yes.
So we're not talking Frankel yet, are we, for Shalar?
No, he's a little bit behind that, you know, and it'll be interesting to see where he goes next. You know, he may well go to France for the Prix-Morny.
That's what
he may,
Harry Herbert was saying the other day.
Looking at Middle Park or something like that, I suspect. So, you know, there is going to be stiffer tasks for him. You know, looking at the horses that he ran against the other day, the second I think we've got rated about 108, 109, something of that region. So, you know, there'll be 114, 15, 16 type horses will be running against him, and we'll find out more.
Yeah, he looks really good, and we should emphasise as well, because I know it's something that does irk you a little bit, that when you compare horses to Frankel like Shalar, you're talking about the same period of time, i.e. not when Frankel was 140, but when he was a 2-year-old, he was 126.
Absolutely.
And Shalar is currently 120 and could be 126 by the end of the
season. And remember that Frankel wasn't actually champion 2-year-old on his own.
It's hard to believe, isn't it?
There was another 126 horse, wasn't it? Was it the David Simcock horse?
Not Dream Ahead, no.
Dream Ahead.
Was it?
Yeah.
He was on
126 with him.
Right.
So
I can't believe I just said not. I hope Dave Simcock's not watching it. He said, how could you possibly... I mean, Dream Ahead,
he was a good
horse.
horse.
Frank the Form, July Cup winner.
He was a good horse.
Yeah.
So, you know, Matthew had them pretty well spot on.
Yeah. And there's a horse who ran the Robert Papa the other day, Gutafan, who is in the same sort of ownership. We're going to have a look at Gutafan while we're talking to Phil. I mean, he just scraped home in France last time, but can you give us a sort of rating comparison between the Robert Papa and Shalar, Phil? We're having a look at Gutafan now, and he's great home, but he seems to be improving. The ground seems to be the key for him. He's a sort of mudlark Gutafan, whereas Shalar probably wants it top of the ground. Gutafan here in the Qatar colours, the maroon cap, winning narrowly, but he's clearly a tough little sort, and hopefully going places. Nowhere near Shalar at the moment.
Well, not yet.
No.
I mean, he's clearly a nice horse. He's won the race in France, but he hasn't won it by very far, and he looks pretty well all out, doesn't he?
Yeah. Okay. He's not going to be a Shalar then, by the sounds of things. Gutafan, and that was it was a Group 2, but to be fair, he got beat, didn't he? At Goodwood first time before going to Salisbury and Chester. So these 2-year-olds, are we thinking these are a vintage crop at the moment, Phil, or is it just the one standout?
I think we've got one standout yet, but it's really early days, isn't it, with 2-year-olds? You know, there's a long way to go. So I wouldn't be in the position to say whether they're a good crop, not very good crop, etc., average crop. There's, you know, we need a lot more information. We've got to have the Jim Crack at York. We've got to have Middle Parks and Dewhursts and Racing Post trophies. A long way to go before we can get to that stage.
Did you have any rating for Acapulco by any chance? Who, of course, Bashara's come and franked the form since, won again. Acapulco just looked like a 10-year-old rather than a 2-year-old.
Well, she's 111.
111. So she's a long way behind. Basically, Shalar would destroy Acapulco.
Well, remember that Acapulco would get a fillies allowance, but we would expect over 6 furlongs Shalar to win that race, on what they've achieved so far.
So if Shalar was, I know it's not going to happen, but if Shalar was supplemented for the Nunthorpe, how interesting would that be?
I'm not a big fan of horses, 2-year-olds running over 6 furlongs then coming back to 5, personally, but it would be interesting.
Do you think we've just put an idea out there?
They get a very hefty weight for age allowance.
I mean, if he's that good, he'd be chucked in, wouldn't he, with the weight for age?
The only thing is the Nunthorpe the sort of test that the horse needs at this stage of its development?
Yeah, but that's becoming very boring if you start operating like that. You're never going to get any big clashes.
That's how trainers operate, and quite rightly so.
Oh,
They've got to be thinking of the future of the horse, surely.
Well, that's not going to make it fun for us, though, is it? Les says, it's a question often asked, it's slightly spurious, but I know what your answer will be, and you're going to give your answer. Is the handicapper allowed to bet?
No.
Stateside?
No. Nowhere in the world.
Nowhere in the world?
It used to be, until 2007, we could not bet in Britain, but we could bet in other parts of the world. I took over in 2007, and we've changed that, and they're not allowed to bet anywhere in the world now.
No. Why is that?
Well, because we have, it would be, I suppose, insider dealing, would it not? So I think it would look really bad.
You know whether you've chucked one in anyway, so...
We never chuck one in. We never ever chuck one in.
I'll definitely try and catch you out from time to time. Mark the Book has emailed in. He says, I suspect and hope the answer is no, but do you take into account a crack apprentice's claim after any race resulting in a horse running off a higher mark in the future than it would do if it had been ridden by a journeyman non-claiming jockey?
We just add the claim back in.
Yeah.
And that's a universal policy, same, all over the world.
Yeah. I don't have any figures, which is always a bad way to start an email, Jim, because it means that Phil immediately will be able to absolutely crack the whip with you. But I don't have any figures to back this up, but it feels like there is a significantly higher number of horses rated in the range just below top class in both codes than there was, say, 10 years ago. So I'm talking on the flat and about the range of 90 to 115 over jumps, 130 to 155. Does Phil know if the feeling is correct, and if so, why would that be? Does he believe there are some more good horses around, or are we seeing a general lifting of ratings across the board?
No, I don't think there's much change.
Just that's it, yes?
I don't see there's any change.
OK. Right, we had one email. How do you get into ratings? How do you do that?
Good question. I'd never been to see a race meeting until my 21st birthday, and a friend took me to the 1970 Derby, and Nijinsky won, and I was absolutely hooked. And he kept his own ratings, based loosely on time form, and he gave us on the day 4 winners, and I thought this was a really good way of supplementing my meagre student grant, and I started keeping my own ratings the next day. Initially, purely on 2-year-olds.
But you've had always the brain for this kind of thing, isn't it? This is figures are your thing.
Figures are my thing. Yeah, so I started the next day, kept my own ratings, and initially I only did 2-year-olds for quite a few years, and then I changed to pattern and listed races, but of 2s, 3s and 4-year-olds.
Hard to stop backing?
Not easy. No, easy.
Right. Do you get a different kick now? Is it just because betting is effectively a buzz? Do you get a different buzz out of getting a race? I mean, when we say hats off to the handicapper or phrases like that, is that the buzz a handicapper gets?
We're really pleased, and we often send emails round to the guys in the team to say, well done on such and such a race. So that's good. But equally, if we have a dodgy finish, we'll send emails round having a pop at them as well.
We've got to just about wrap up. Can I just squeeze one response to just something Pat's back about? He's clearly not going to let you off the hook about Au Petit Soin. Okay. He says, thank you, Matt and Phil. While the corroborative nature of international handicappers is outlined by Mr. Smith, you know you're in trouble when he says that, is valid, it does suggest a deeper class difference in ways. For example, while the BHA handicapper after consultation with the Irish and French counterparts, this is often not applied when racing again outside Britain. E.g., suppose Elliot has a winner in Perth off 95. He may get 10 or 12 for winning easily, and then go back to Ireland and race off what was his Irish mark, 95, and often then not win. even though, according to Mr. Swift, the ratings in Northern Ireland and Scotland are in parity with other spheres. Is that nonsense what Pat is saying, or does he have a point?
Well, I think it's very, very unlikely that Noel O'Brien would see a race where an Irish horse has won in Kelso or Perth